welcome my YouTube channel, Stoic, Powerful Habits. Asterisk, ladies and gentlemen. Asterisk, there's a moment in every soul's evolution when you stop chasing, fixing, explaining, or proving. That moment doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, like a sunrise. One morning, you wake up, and the grip they had on you is just gone. Not because they changed, but because you did. Said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That is the game they were playing with you. Your unconscious wounds were being pulled like puppet strings. The need to be loved, the fear of abandonment, the craving for validation. Unexpected happens when you sit in silence long enough. You begin to see through the fog of your desperation. You realize the person you were begging to stay was never actually seeing you. They were only feeding off the version of you that didn't know your own worth. And when you finally realize that, you vanish. Not physically, but energetically. No more explaining your side. No more waiting on a text. No more trying to be understood. No more bending to be loved. You start to do the inner work. You walk into your shadow. You confront the pain you've been outsourcing to other people. The anger, the grief, the self-betrayal, you feel it all. You sit with the discomfort without reaching for someone to save you from it. And in that crucible, something alchemical begins. Your pain becomes fuel. Your silence becomes discipline. Your absence becomes power. And this is where the Stoics enter. They teach you not to react emotionally, but to respond with character. No outbursts. No pettiness. Just a cold, calm detachment of a person who has reclaimed their mind. You wake up earlier. You train harder. You build routines. You eliminate distractions. You start reading again, meditating, writing. You enter solitude not as a punishment, but as sacred space. And suddenly, they feel your absence like thunder. They remember the way you listened when no one else did. They remember your patience, your presence, your softness. But you no longer need to be remembered because you no longer need them. And that is the most unexpected thing. Not revenge, not bitterness, detachment. But simply this, living your life as though they never had that kind of power over you in the first place. That silence, that lack of reaction, that glowing transformation. That is what haunts them. It's not just that you're gone. It's who you became after they left. Jung believed that wholeness requires embracing both your light and your shadow. That means loving the parts of you they couldn't, protecting the energy you gave away too freely. It means becoming the man or a woman who no longer entertains chaos just to feel alive. And here's the truth. When you finally become this version of yourself, you don't even need them to regret losing you. Because you're no longer the person who needs to be missed. You're not doing it for closure. You're not doing it for revenge. You're doing it because you were never meant to stay in their storm. So disappear, but not in anger. Disappear into growth, into strength, into your calling. And when they search for the old version of you, let them know that person doesn't live here anymore. Asterisk. The most powerful shift in your world occurs not when another person changes, but when you change what you are conscious of being. The outer world, with all its people, situations, and betrayals, is nothing but a reflection of what you are imagining. When someone treats you as though you are unworthy, it is not because they possess some secret knowledge of your value. It's because in your inner conversations, you agreed with that verdict before they ever spoke a word. And so the transformation begins not by confronting them, but by withdrawing your energy from the image of yourself that allowed such treatment to exist in the first place. You must come to know the weight of your attention. Where you place it, you give life. Where you withdraw it, you allow dissolution. Your attention is the oxygen of every relationship, and until you become the master of your own direction, others will continue to breathe freely from your spirit, without ever giving you permission to breathe in your own worth. Most aren't aware of this power. They remain reactive, emotionally enslaved to others' behaviors, mistaking reaction for connection. But the one who awakens knows nothing changes unless I first withdraw the belief that they are the source of my emotional well-being. This withdrawal is not passive. It is an act of sacred defiance. When you no longer respond with pain, explanation, or apology, when you no longer reach to be heard by someone who feeds on your desperation, you are not being cold. You are reclaiming your power. You are no longer casting pearls before those who trampled them. You are returning to the holy place within, where imagination becomes reality and the self becomes whole again. In that withdrawal, a vacuum is created not in your soul, but in theirs, for they depended upon your reaction to affirm their dominance. And now you give them silence instead of struggle, indifference instead of insecurity, peace instead of pleading. Withdraw from their world, but more importantly, withdraw from the idea of yourself that gave them such access to your inner kingdom. Begin to observe what you have imagined about yourself in their presence. Have you imagined yourself unworthy, unseen, desperate to be chosen? Then do not blame them for playing a role in the scene you authored in your sleep. You must become aware of the inner drama playing out behind the scenes. You must eavesdrop on the thoughts you have when you are alone. These thoughts are prayers. These assumptions are prophecies, and your world is only reflecting them with painful accuracy. There is no transformation without awareness. In the moment you become aware that your attention has been hijacked by the illusion of another's power over you, you can reclaim it. You do this not by fighting, but by withdrawing your emotional currency. You do not beg for change. You do not seek closure. You quietly observe where you gave your attention and you bring it home. Home is the silence within where you can hear your soul again. It is the secret place where you no longer react to what is, but imagine what can be. And that is where the second step begins. The radical act of self-reflection. The kind that doesn't flatter, doesn't justify, and doesn't excuse. It strips away the mask, exposing the deep-rooted beliefs you've worn for too long. Did you accept less than you deserved? Why did you stay silent when your soul screamed for truth? Why did you fear losing someone who constantly showed you they didn't fear losing you? This reflection is not self-blame. It is self-reclamation. For you cannot change what you do not own. You cannot command your reality if you still deny your authorship. You must become intimate with your wounds, not to stay in them, but to transmute them. If you were constantly afraid of abandonment, trace that fear to its first image. Did it begin in childhood? Did it begin in a relationship where your love was weaponized against you? Observe it. Don't flinch, for this is the shadow you must embrace if you wish to stop reenacting the same pain in different costumes. You will see that your greatest agony was not what they did to you, but what you believed about yourself because of what they did. And that belief became your inner state. And that state summoned more of the same. But once you see the pattern, you are no longer a victim. You are the potter. The clay is still wet. The world is still soft beneath your attention. And you can now choose to imagine something else entirely. Withdraw the belief that you are dependent on them for peace. Withdraw the belief that you are incomplete without their love. Stop imagining scenes of them returning with apologies and tears. Instead, imagine that your soul has returned to you. You walk in fullness. That you rise in silence and the world bends to your self-respect. Imagine that your voice no longer shakes because it is no longer begging. Imagine that your posture speaks what your words do not. I remember who I am. This remembering is the greatest act of spiritual warfare. For when you remember, you no longer seek. You no longer trade your dignity for temporary comfort. You no longer stay just to feel less lonely. You choose solitude over simulation. You choose peace over performance. And this choice becomes a new vibration. It changes the field. It alters the echo of your life. Okay. Without needing to speak a single word, the old world begins to crumble. Not because they suddenly see your value, but because you no longer imagine yourself as someone who needs to be seen by them. And when you stop imagining them as the source of your worth, they lose the ability to define it. The moment you do this, you become unpredictable. They expect you to cry. You meditate. They expect you to chase. You disappear. They expect guilt. You embody grace. You no longer dance to their rhythm because the music in your soul has changed. That is the beginning of true creation. For only when you are empty of their influence can you be full of your own vision. In this sacred silence, the voice within becomes louder. You begin to feel the pull of your true desires again. The dream you buried under someone else's comfort. The purpose you postponed while performing for their approval. It rises now, not with urgency, but with certainty. And now your attention is no longer wasted on stories that dishonor you. It is given only to what aligns with your becoming. This is the practice. Each day you sit, you listen, you imagine from the end, not from lack, not from revenge, but from the inner conviction that what you are conscious of being is the only thing that matters. And you will see the outer world respond in kind, not always immediately, not always in the ways you expect, but with mathematical precision. Your state of being will call forth a world that matches its frequency. And you, who once begged to be chosen, will become the chooser, the one who no longer waits, the one who no longer breaks, the one who no longer feeds what does not feed back. Your silence will echo louder than your sorrow, not your self-respect will. Speak louder than your pain. Okay. And your inner world, once ruled by fear and craving, will now become the temple where your new life begins. Asterisk. There is a strength that no external force can grant, and no loss can take away. It arises the moment you stop waiting for others to give you permission to be what you already are. This power does not ask, does not seek approval, and does not tremble before the opinions of others. It simply moves forward, rooted in the conviction that reality conforms to the shape of inner belief. The moment you stop apologizing for your presence and begin to live from the assumption that you are enough, the world subtly bends in recognition. Every time you shrink for the comfort of others, every time you modify yourself to be more palatable, you deny the very force that makes manifestation possible. What appears to be humility is often hidden fear. The fear of being fully expressed, the fear of being seen, the fear of being rejected for who you actually are. Yet, what you fear most holds the key to your liberation. To live unapologetically is not to become loud or arrogant, but to rest in the silent certainty that your desires are valid, your presence is justified, and your existence is not a negotiation. You were not born to be someone's accessory. You were not created to orbit around moods, conditions, or temporary affections. The moment you begin to stand still in your being, instead of shifting for others' comfort, you step into your role as creator. The outer world is nothing but reflected consciousness. And if your sense of self depends on who approves or who stays, then your reality will always be unstable, trembling on the edge of rejection. But if you anchor yourself into knowing that you are the source of your world, then you no longer need to fit into theirs. To become unapologetically independent is not a rebellion, it is a return. It is the act of remembering who you were before you learned to perform for acceptance. You stop reciting lines that were written by fear. You begin writing scenes from conviction. You no longer fear being misunderstood because you understand yourself. You no longer explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding. You act, speak, and move as one who trusts the unseen laws that govern the scene. And this trust becomes your shield. When you stop adjusting your truth for comfort, the world reacts, will withdraw. Others will challenge. But all of this knows You are no longer dancing for applause. You are no longer shrinking for inclusion. You are imagining from a state that declares, I do not need to become anything. I only need to become aware that I already am. From that awareness, you act. You make decisions not from the fear of being alone, but from the clarity of alignment. And every action born from alignment carries the weight of the unseen. You cannot serve your vision while serving the moods of others. You cannot be loyal to your calling while being tethered to emotional dependency. Emotional slavery ends the moment you no longer need to be chosen. You begin to choose. You choose solitude over noise. You choose growth over approval. Silence over shallow affection. And in that choosing, the world rearranges. Once you claim your independence, a new kind of calm emerges. A calm that is not reactive, not practiced, but innate. This calm is the natural expression of one who has ceased outsourcing power. It is the stillness that arises when you no longer need to control people, fix situations, or beg reality to bend, because you know that it already is. That what you hold within, you will hold in hand. That what you assume must become form. So why rush? Why panic? Why plead? There is no urgency in creation. There is only alignment. True calm is not a suppression, a feeling but the mastery of internal atmosphere. The external world may shake, chaos may unfold, people may leave, but the one who has claimed dominion over self remains unmoved. This stillness is not detachment, it is control. Not over others, but over the only instrument that matters, the mind. You learn to separate circumstance from state. You no longer let the noise of the moment dictate the quality of your being. You observe the world without letting it enter you. Most are tossed from one emotional wave to another. They react, they explode, they retreat, and yet they wonder why their world remains turbulent. But nothing changes until you do. The calm spirit is not born of ease, but of decision. A decision to no longer allow the external to alter the internal. You walk through the same storm, but you carry a different atmosphere. And that atmosphere becomes a shield. You begin to understand that chaos is bait. It tempts you to react. It lures you back into old roles. But when you do not take the bait, when you observe without feeding it, something miraculous happens. The chaos loses power. The moment you no longer match its frequency, it begins to dissolve. People who once thrived on your emotional response begin to feel starved. Situations that once triggered panic now pass like clouds. You realize that you were never the victim of the storm, you were the sky. From the sky-like awareness, you respond with precision. You speak less. You listen. More, you choose your actions with intent. Your movements carry weight because they are no longer impulsive. They are deliberate. You have stopped chasing control and started creating from calm. And now, the reality you once fought to fix begins to shift on its own. Not because you forced it, but because you ceased fueling the opposite. Your calm becomes a mystery to those who once rattled you. They don't understand why their chaos no longer reaches you. They don't understand how you became untouchable without becoming cruel. But you know, you became the one who returns within. The one who no longer reacts but imagines. The one who sees a storm and remains dry. Not because the storm stopped, but because your atmosphere changed. Every day you will be invited to return to the old self. You will be tempted to re-enter the chaos, to argue, to justify, to react. Each time you resist that invitation, you rewrite your identity. Each time you remain in stillness, you affirm your authority. This authority is not loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It simply is. And from that being, it attracts. Others will feel the difference, the way you carry yourself, the peace in your silence, the weight in your presence. They will not always understand it, but they will feel it. They may even test it. But when you do not respond, when you do not perform, they are left only with their own reflection. And you, unaffected, remain the author of a new scene. To be calm in a world that profits off your reaction is a radical act. To be calm in the face of manipulation is sovereignty. And to be calm while imagining new realities is mastery. This calm is not a technique, it's the natural result of self-possession. When you no longer need to argue, defend, or rush, you are ready to receive. And what you receive is always in harmony with the atmosphere you create within. There is nothing external to fix. There is nothing outside to chase, only states to occupy. And once you occupy the state of calm authority, the world cannot help but conform. It will seem as though people change, as though situations shift. But it is only the mirror reflecting what you are now conscious of being. And that being is no longer dependent, no longer reactive. It is whole. It is sure. It is silently creating what once seemed impossible. Asterisk, there is a turning point in the life of the awakened individual when the compulsion to fix, prove, or save dissolves into something far more powerful: stillness. This stillness is not weakness. It is alchemical. It is the silent refusal to be pulled into narratives that no longer match the frequency of who you are becoming. The moment you no longer need to repair the broken mirrors in front of you, you begin to realize that you were never the reflection, you were always the light. Many spend their days entangled in the need to be accepted, to be understood, to be appreciated by those who cannot even recognize themselves. They mistake emotional labor for love, mistaking validation for connection. They pour endlessly into people and circumstances, as if healing others will somehow complete the brokenness they carry within. But the one who begins to observe instead of intervene, to step back instead of step in, is the one who understands the secret. Not everything that calls you deserves your reply. To detach alchemically is to withdraw the lifeblood of identification from the roles that kept you in a cycle of emotional captivity. You are not the savior, nor the victim. You are not obligated to explain your peace to those who benefit from your confusion. Detachment is not abandonment. It is the sacred act of removing your soul from patterns that feed on your presence while starving your becoming. This kind of detachment transmutes pain into clarity. It turns longing into vision. It allows you to see what is without the fog of sentiment or guilt. And in this vision, you begin to witness people and situations as assignments, not anchors. You stop asking why they left and start asking why you stay. You stop justifying chaos with history and begin honoring your future with distance. When you no longer rush in to rescue, you allow the other to meet themselves. You become a mirror, not a shield. Your silence becomes instruction. Your absence becomes illumination. You no longer explain because your vibration speaks. Longer try to be seen because your awareness reveals. And in this stillness, you create space for your own refinement. The alchemist does not curse the lead for being heavy. He knows it must be transmuted within. He heats it. He breaks it. He waits. In the same way, your detachment is not withdrawal from life. It is a recalibration to higher order. You no longer interfere with what must collapse. You no longer resist what must arise. Your presence becomes intentional. Your absence deliberate. And into this stillness, discipline emerges not as punishment, but as design. The outer structure begins to match the inner order. You rise not from obligation, but from vision. The body becomes an instrument. The mind, a lens. The spirit, a current that flows through each act with purpose. You no longer wake to be entertained, distracted, or liked. You wake to govern. The one who understands the creative power of consciousness does not wait for motivation. It builds systems that reflect the world he is imagining. A T creates routines that sharpen his awareness. A K, he removes what dulls his perception. He treats every hour as sacred and every task as symbolic. What others call discipline, he calls alignment. What others resist, he repeats. Not because it is easy, but because it is essential. Repetition, rightly understood, is the foundation of all creation. Every assumption repeated becomes belief. Every belief accepted becomes reality. So the disciplined one is not bound by routine, but liberated by it. He knows that the unseen responds not to fleeting emotion, but to sustained vibration. And that vibration is crafted in solitude, maintained in practice, revealed in time. Each day becomes a ritual. The body is moved not just for health, but for command. The breath is deepened not just for calm, but for clarity. The diet is cleaned not just for strength, but for sensitivity. The media consumed, the words spoken, the people allowed closed, all filtered through the lens of becoming. There is no longer space for chaos disguised as love, or distraction dressed as necessity. And though the outer world may see such discipline as extreme, the inner world knows otherwise. There is nothing extreme about honoring your potential. There is nothing rigid about refusing to betray yourself again. It is not harsh to protect your vision from environments that have no interest in its birth. You do not owe your presence to what drains your precision. You do not owe your energy to what laughs at your focus. This path is not lonely. It is sovereign. You begin to attract differently. Those who enter your field either rise or leave. You no longer chase resonance. You become it. You no longer hope for understanding. You live in such clarity that misunderstanding cannot touch you. And this clarity is sustained not in grand moments, but in small choices, repeated with reverence. World is always responding to your state. If you are chaotic within, even the calm will become confusing. If you are still within, even the chaos will become direction. Discipline is how you command this stillness. It is how you prepare the vessel to hold the power you have imagined. Without it, the energy spills. With it, the energy creates. Do not wait for the world to slow down. It was never designed for your peace. Do not wait for the perfect time to begin. The perfect time is the moment you decide. Begin simply. Rise early. Clean your space. Speak less. Move with intent. Fast from noise. Read what sharpens. Train what strengthens. Practice what steals. Repeat until it becomes identity. The one who embodies discipline is no longer ruled by emotion. He does not need to feel ready. He moves because he has chosen the direction. His feelings serve him. They do not lead him. His pain is observed, not indulged. His fears are noticed, not obeyed. He builds while others complain. He practices while others postpone. He receives what others still wish for. There is no magic without method. Imagination needs structure. Vision needs a vessel. The divine cannot pour itself into the unprepared. You must make yourself ready. You must create the inner order that welcomes the outer shift. You must become a container worthy of the content you are asking for. And this becoming is not dramatic. It is daily. Let each act be a declaration. Let your habits preach what your mouth no longer needs to say. Let your posture teach what your past could not. Walk as though the reality you desire is already yours, because in the unseen, it is. And each disciplined choice is a bridge between the invisible and the visible. You are not waiting. You are becoming. You are not hoping. You are shaping. The discipline you practice is not to earn worth, but to express it. It is not to prove, but to reveal. It is a sacred partnership between consciousness and commitment, between imagination and incarnation. This is how mountains move, not with noise, but with rhythm, not in rush, but in devotion. Every morning you rise in this awareness, you prove to life that you are ready. Every evening you return to this silence, you reclaim the throne of your mind. And in between, the world shifts. Not because it was forced, but because you no longer need to chase what you now embody. Asterisk, the moment the mind fixes itself on purpose, everything not in harmony with that focus begins to fall away. There is no effort in this release, only the natural consequence of clarity. When a man no longer lives to be accepted by people, but to express the truth seated within him, his atmosphere changes. The priorities rearrange. Rejection is now recognized as redirection. What once felt like loss becomes pruning, and the soul grows upward, unburdened by the weight of unnecessary connections. The world has trained many to pursue people more than they pursue meaning. They become available to everyone and loyal to none of their own dreams. They adjust their path for the comfort of companions who neither walk beside them in spirit nor understand the journey itself. But the one who wakes begins to notice the imbalance. He no longer trades his divine assignment for social alignment. He understands that every great calling requires a certain level of sacred separation. Purpose is not loud. It does not demand that you shout it. It does not crave applause, but it commands attention from within. And once it is heard, once it stirs, the noise of the world becomes offensive. No conversation satisfies. No shallow bond endures. The soul craves movement, expansion, and the discipline of direction. And in this craving, the old attachments are seen clearly not as evils, odd, but as expired echoes of who you once were. When you begin to choose your mission over the moods of others, you are not becoming hard. You are becoming exact. There is a vast difference between kindness and agreement. You are not required to dim your vision so others feel less insecure. You are not required to dilute your pace so they don't feel left behind. You must go. You must move. You must become the one who refuses to apologize for aligning with the voice within. You were not designed to fit, tease, into everyone's comfort. You were designed to follow the thread of inner purpose, and this thread does not wind through every crowd. There will be rooms you must exit, not because of hatred, but because the frequency no longer matches the rhythm of your becoming. And this departure, when born of love for truth, carries no bitterness. It is simply necessary. Purpose grants clarity that sentiment cannot. You begin to discern who walks with you and who merely stands near you. Not everyone who claps is aligned. Not everyone who stays is a supporter. Some remain because your uncertainty gives them power. But when you become unwavering in your path, those who are feeding off your doubt begin to fall away. The shedding is sacred. The withdrawal is holy. And in this removal, your presence gains weight. The one who moves with purpose no longer panics. When others leave, he no longer begs for reassurance. He no longer re-explains his passion to those who mock its flame. He understands that purpose requires protection, and that protection begins with solitude. To walk alone, not in loneliness, but in sovereignty, is a stage every creator must pass through. And then, something subtle happens. The need to be understood disappears. The craving to be seen dissolves. There is a deeper nourishment now being aligned with something eternal. You begin to measure your days not by what others gave you, but by how deeply you obeyed your own direction. The old need for emotional rescue was replaced by inner fire. The one who walks in purpose becomes a lighthouse, not a search party. And with that purpose, your disappearance begins not in flesh, but in frequency. You no longer linger where your spirit is unwelcome. You no longer perform in places that ignore your presence. You fade from the versions of yourself that were addicted to being chosen. You no longer explain your worth. You no longer prove your peace. You simply vanish, not out of spite, but out of completion. The most powerful departure carries no noise. It holds no bitterness. It leaves no trail of resentment. It moves like the tide, sure, quiet, and irreversible. You do not block. You do not announce. You do not rage. You simply leave where your light is not recognized. because light does not stay where it is perpetually dimmed, and that disappearance is not the end. Restoring it is the beginning of mastery. For once, you are no longer trying to be seen. You finally see yourself. Once you no longer fight to be heard, your inner voice becomes louder.